everybody, Tony D with another hot take, and this one is, what the heck, is our government doing besides tackling the coronavirus? Now, you may think from the press conferences during this crisis that the government's sole focus is this coronavirus, and you'd be very wrong, because we live in a country which has a huge government bureaucracy with thousands of people at its behest, and they are working, sometimes even cross purposes, on various things. And one of the things people have forgotten about, and the government is taking advantage, is we're occupying many countries and bombing the hell out of them. And in fact, you may not have heard that we are bombing Iraq again. Who are we bombing? Well, it's a little organization. It is the Iraqi branch of Hezbollah, they call themselves. Something Hezbollah. I can't pronounce the name. And they are actually in the Iraqi parliament and recognized as a political party within Iraq. They're more closely associated with the Iranians, who do support Hezbollah. And we just bombed their bases. And the Iraqis are angry. As well they should be. We shouldn't be there, obviously. I do not support any of this. I think Trump should have just pulled all the troops out and said, we're done. Of course, he thinks he can, like everybody, he's got the ego to think he can micromanage these wars to the point that we'll get some benefit out of it. I don't really think he can. In the long run, it'll cost more. It'll cause more damage to us on the international scene. We'd just be better off pulling out of there, letting the chips fall where they may. But, of course, you've got a lot of NeoCons and NeoLiberals in Congress who are like, ooh, the Iranians are sick. Now is our chance. Regime change, regime change. I think that'll happen anyway. You know, if you just let the horrible regime of the Iranians run itself into the ground, then we're not going to get the blame, number one, for toppling it, or credit, depending on how you look at it. But more importantly, the people of Iran will overthrow their government on their own, and then the new government can call us and say, hey, we got a cool new government and let's be friends. And then we could be cool with that and start building Burger Kings and Taco Bells over there. If you help them, then there'll always be a faction in Iran that will say, hey, you know, this wouldn't have happened if, it's like our socialist here, right? Like they believe like, you know, oh, we'd have socialism if it wasn't for this, this, and this. It's the same thing over there. They're going to believe that, well, the Iranian mullahs could have continued if only those evil Americans hadn't intervened. So we don't want that rep, and we don't want to, you know, get ourselves involved. And the main reason we don't want to get involved is they'll fall apart anyway. Communism doesn't work. Whatever system of government, I guess you'd call it a theocracy, that doesn't work either. These governments don't work, and they destroy themselves. You know, for the communists, they destroy themselves under the weight of their ever-expanding empire, the corruption, everything. And it falls apart, and it did. Now, you could argue that we hastened it by spending them into the ground and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but did we really, you know, pull the levers to help destroy it? No, because if you look at, and I was around during that time, if you look at that time period, you had all these groups in Washington going, no, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. The Soviet Union is a terrible thing. No, they're just tricking us. Don't listen to them. And the reality was they were falling apart. They were a paper tiger after a point. And really in the beginning, I mean, they were a dictatorship run by Stalin, and then it was taken over by the people after him, and they really didn't have anywhere to go with it. You don't have anywhere to go with an empire other than to expand and collapse. You know, even Genghis Khan, arguably the most successful emperor who ever lived, you know, he would eventually die. He'd eventually like run out of places to conquer. You know, horses at that time could only go so far. The Romans ran out of room. They ran out of people to conquer and steal money from. So what do? You then you just have to operate what's happening. And that's the problem with politicians. They don't want to just keep things going. They want to make money. They want to make a name for themselves. And they look at the past, all these great victories, all these great wars, and they say, I want to be that guy too. Problem is, once you've conquered the whole world, there are no wars. There are no people to conquer. There are no enemies worthy of you. So what happens is, as happened in Rome, as kind of what's happening here, the enemies come from within. And those are a lot less sexier enemies. It's not very sexy to fight corruption in your own capital because, first off, you're admitting that you have problems. And even if you cure the corruption, there'll always be more of it. And then your political rivals will point to it and say, ha, see, you missed these guys. There's only so much you can do. So the United States is taking the time while everyone's distracted with the virus to bomb some of our enemies and to get a dig in to Iran. And you don't hear the Democrats crowing about it, do you? I mean, you'd think if the Democrats were really anti-war, let's say, or really against all these policies in the Middle East, they'd be going bananas. And all their media pundits would be on the air going, this is an outrage. We've bombed members of parliament in the Iraqi parliament. And these people have a legitimate sovereign claim to being in Iraq. And we bombed them. And there would be all this outrage. And people would get on the floor of Congress. And they'd be demanding the impeachment of Trump. But they're not. They're not because they don't care. And for them, they basically agree with that policy. If they were in charge, they'd be doing the same damn thing because they think that they rule the world. And they're punishing, in this case, the Hezbollah guys who are aligned with the Iranians who, you know, in their defense, they did attack Americans in the early 2000s. Of course, they wouldn't have attacked Americans if we hadn't invaded the country on false pretenses to begin with. But, so this payback is just going to keep grinding the gears of war for the next time. Now, a little bit of positive news on the anti-war front. Chelsea Manning was finally released from prison again. This after apparently another attempted suicide. I never really confirmed if that was true. They said it was true. They didn't really talk about it much, but I'm glad she's out. She certainly does not deserve this sort of treatment a second time, and much less the first time. She's been freed. Let her go, for God's sakes. How many times are you going to go back and hurt this person? She did us all a service, and at this point, it's just been so long. I mean, really? Is this how long we're going to go after these people? Is this how petty we are as the U.S. government, that we're going to go after these people? You're going to go after Snowden when he's 80 and he flies to Los Angeles for some award? You're gonna pick him up and start trying him for treason? I mean, it would be ridiculous. It's time to acknowledge that people like Chelsea Manning and people like Edward Snowden did us all a great service. And Julian Assange, still in jail, still fighting extradition to this country. I don't know why Trump is pursuing this. I think, the people in the intelligence community, they have tremendous egos. And from their perspective, they see it as, if we don't punish this guy, we'll have every computer hacker who think they can waltz in and F with us. That shouldn't be their response. Their response should be, how was this guy able to do that, and why are we, the most powerful country on earth, allowing ourselves to be hacked by some rando? We shouldn't be hackable. We should have, things in place that this information doesn't leak out. And the problem with these leaks is things leak out when people think you're doing wrong. And we are doing wrong. We have been for many years. So if we weren't involved, low battery, if we weren't involved in all these various border disputes and occupying countries and all these things, we'd be more united as a people on our foreign policy. And then you wouldn't get leakers, because the people who work in the NSA or the CIA or the Army or the FBI or wherever, they would all agree with our policies, because our policies would be about defending this country, and that would be the main focus. And we wouldn't be thinking about, well, how can we tamp down the Syrians and help the Turks, but not help them too much, because they're against the Kurds, and we got to help the Kurds because they like the Israelis. And no, it's a chessboard that no one wins. You can pit all these guys against each other and sell them weapons, I guess, but is that really a moral thing to do? I don't think so. We should just pull out of that region and say, listen, we're pulling out. We do more harm than good, and you guys have to settle your differences. And we want you to settle them peacefully. Turkey, Turkey's a big player in the region and a NATO ally. You say to Turkey, look, we're going to pull out of the region. We're going to give you essentially control, but you can't wipe these people out. You got to make peace with them. You got to do the right thing and just draw some borders on a map, call it a day with the Kurds, and be done. And if you don't, we're not going to sell you weapons. We're not going to sell you anything, and we're going to economically sanction you. That's what we should be doing. Instead, Turkey is, it's a wild card in the region, and you got what's his name, Erdogan, trying to play everybody against each other. He's playing a very dangerous game, and he's going to get smacked. He's going to get smacked by the Russians, if not us. And this is why we shouldn't even be in NATO. As the founding fathers said, we have to avoid entangling alliances, and NATO is now a very entangling alliance. What are you going to do if the Turks really go after the Russians and kill a bunch of their people, and the Russians are mad? You want to start World War III over that? I don't think you do. So I do not like any of the stuff the Trump administration is doing on this front. They should be, if anything, they should be taking advantage of the distraction of the coronavirus to push forth legislation and orders that will allow us to withdraw from the region. Because with nobody looking, you could finally get out and not turn it into a political issue. You could pull out of these countries, and the Dems couldn't say boo because everybody's concentrating on the coronavirus. Oh, I'm sure they would. I'm sure they would say things, but that would distract them from the coronavirus, and you're gonna get your butt beat on that. They are gonna beat you over the head with that stick for a while. So you might as well take advantage of it and do something good. Congrats on Chelsea Manning for getting out of jail, but bad move on Trump's part for allowing this to happen. I would say, please stop doing this, and concentrate on things here. Bring those troops home, so we can. And by the way, the coronavirus is in Afghanistan, but the troops are, these guys are some of the most fit guys on the planet. So you don't have to worry about 99% of these guys are going to be fine. I don't think any of them have. I mean, the whole point of being in the Army, you can't have a problem with your immune system or whatever. They wouldn't even allow you in. So, they're going to be fine, but they are going to be sick, and that's going to impact things, in the occupation. But again, another reason you should just bring them home, because we could definitely use those resources and people here, making this country better, and running the checks for the roadside checks for coronavirus, which I haven't seen yet. Thinking about going to one just to get checked out, but I feel fine. So, as they say, you shouldn't get checked if you don't really need it.